Welcome to the Scottish Property Podcast. This is a show where we aim to educate, inspire and entertain through real life stories and interviews from people in the Scottish property community.
As always, thanks for listening and give us a follow on social media and subscribe to our YouTube channel. Remember to join us at our monthly networking events on the first Wednesday of every month. Tickets are available on our website. So without further ado, we'll just cut straight into this week's podcast. Okay, Colin Macmillan, welcome to the Scottish Property Podcast. Glasgow Property Letting. You're a letting agent, you're a landlord. We've invited you in here today to offer an opinion and a view on our market update. So, welcome.
Cheers, Nick. Thanks for having me.
Great stuff.
Good to be here.
Fresh in from the Sting concert last night, was it?
It was indeed, yes.
How was that?
Took me back a few years.
72, still rocking.
Yeah.
Not you, him.
Him, yes, definitely. Makes me feel dead young.
Brilliant, good stuff. So we're going to talk about all things going on in the property market today. As listeners, regular listeners will know, we will pull out the stats and the headlines from the month that's just passed. You've kindly come in to offer your experience and thoughts on things, and it's your first time in here today, so I'll just give you a flavour of what we've got to talk about. We're going to talk about house prices, rent prices. There's a new housing minister just been put in place. That'll be interesting to see how that pans out. House building stats, new affordable home stats hit a 12-year low in Scotland. That's a great way to solve the housing crisis, isn't it? And short-term lets clamp down. So Highland Council proposes a regional wide control on Airbnbs and short-term lets. So that's a wee flavour of what's to come. But first, we always like to kick off with a wee update on what's going on in the general economy and a wee kind of macro picture about how things are panning out. So UK Bank of England base rate currently at 4.25%, unchanged in the last review. So not much change there in terms of interest rates. We obviously look at the swap rates as well. Swap rates are actually what the banks price their fixed term mortgages on. So that's what we're looking at, our 5-year deals and stuff. They're down a little bit, so that's good news. And UK inflation is at 3.4%. But the big kind of talking point at the moment, obviously how things we're in a world that is very uncertain at the moment in terms of we've just obviously entered probably another war already. There was 2 or 3 conflicts happening. We've now got another one with Iran. So I know you've been keeping an eye on this one. So what's your thoughts about how that could affect the economy?
I think we'll probably know in the next few days the reality of it. Depends on the ceasefire actually works or not. If the oil, it's all related to oil. Inflation could kick us
back
fairly hard. Somebody was actually touting the other day. I don't think there's been a panic buy at the filling stations yet, but last week I did fill up my cars just to make sure that we did have them, because they were talking about prices going up to £7 per litre if a tanker got sunk in the Straits of Hormuz, for example.
So obviously the price of oil could be affected. It just depends how obviously Iran are going to react to that, and that's the kind of main power they have of shutting off that route
tap. Yes,
for the oil. Definitely. They're obviously a big producer as well. But it's a scary time that we live in.
How much does Iran actually produce for the world supply? It's quite a big percentage, isn't it?
It's a surprising amount, amount. But it could, it's a false economy, because I think it could affect them more than it would affect
the rest of the world. Yeah. So a lot of what they're built on is from it. And that, you mentioned the Strait of Hormuz, is it?
Straits of Hormuz.
Is that the Gulf of Arabia with the
between kind of UAE and Iran? It's a very narrow
passage.
About 20% of global oil and LNG trade flows through the Strait of Hormuz. Obviously, LNG, that's gas,
liquid
petroleum gas, liquid gas, which powers our gas boilers.
Yeah.
So it could have huge impacts now that we're playing at that level.
Yep.
Not playing, obviously, but that's a bad choice of words. But I don't want to kind of get things out of control at this point, because I'm actually surprised at how little they have retaliated. Obviously, there was that strike on the Qatar US airbase, which never really did much at all.
Yep.
But obviously closing the main route there, that could be their power play.
Yes, but they don't want to shoot themselves in the foot either. I think that's the thing.
So it's all a bit of doom and gloom in the world, and all a bit uncertain. Obviously, uncertainty breeds fear in markets, but so far it's not gone too crazy at the moment. I think price of oil's like, I don't know if you noticed at the pumps, it's like right down at the moment, and it's not really shot up. So far so good. Let's hope we can.
Even looking at the stock market, it didn't really react to it either.
Hopefully we can weather it out. And just in terms of the general economy itself, and are you hearing anything from tenants or people like that about people struggling, rent arrears? How are your rent arrears at the moment in terms of the letting agency? How many properties do you manage, by the way?
About 300.
Right, okay. So you'll have a
circa 300.
You'll have a picture.
Yeah. I mean, first of all, cost of living crisis a couple of years ago, and everyone was affected probably more by that. Things like EPCs, a lot more people are concerned about energy performance certificates now and what the reality is.
The tenants, you mean?
The tenants. Years ago, tenants never asked about it. They just thought it was a rainbow graph. Didn't mean anything. Now they're
analysing it.
Yeah. Yeah, it's down to the pound, shillings and pence, the cost of running a property. We're actually seeing rents probably being pushed out slightly further. So if you look at arterial roads like Dumbarton Road, Kilmarnock Road, you can actually do an analysis. You'll see the rents sort of spike round about the university and then drop the further out you go. Yeah. So it's pushing people further out. If people want more bang for your buck, you're going to move to potentially places like Yoker, Clydebank, Bowling even, just to get out.
Yeah. So looking at the job market stats there as well, I never put that in the notes, but obviously number of vacancies are actually right down. Obviously with this hike in the employers' national insurance and all the rest of it, so that's not got a great impact overall in the economy as well. Employers tightening up, not as many job opportunities. We're on a bit of a shaky.
Employers themselves are a wee bit uncertain, I think, as well. So that's maybe got a kick through as well.
How many people do you employ? Sorry, Stephen.
We got five.
Right. Do you think the development of AI is helping employers maybe not employ staff that they would have normally done and trying to utilise new technologies coming through?
I think the AI thing is always one of these things a lot of people are kind of feared of AI, until they actually realise ChatGPT, what it can do for you, and
even
all the
you're
rest
using
of
it now, aren't you, man?
I'm still that middle-aged man that uses like Google right now.
Yeah. It will come. I think it's just a learning curve for people actually. Courses put aside where people actually say this is what AI can really do for you. But it will happen. It will take over, a few jobs.
Yeah. You need to figure out how to reply to your text messages now.
Well, that's what I'd love to be able to do. I saw the girl was in the office did something for the landscaping for the flip project I'm doing, and they just took a picture of it and designed the landscaping for this. And I was like, oh, that looks pretty good. Oh, can you add in slabs there and done that? And it was like a few
amazing
prompts, and it had pretty much done it. So I'm thinking, there's designer jobs gone, like interior design. That's going to be hugely effective.
I fixed a boiler with it yesterday, straight into AI, straight into GPT, because I know how to top up the pressure, do the basics, all the rest of it. But I don't know, when you look at the underside of a combi boiler and there's about 5 or 6 different valves.
Yes.
I'm always unsure which one's the gas valve. Do you know what I mean?
Don't turn the yellow one off.
I know it's the yellow one now, obviously. But I took a picture of it and straight into ChatGPT, which one is the gas valve and is this in the on or off position? Right. And it told me exactly what to do. So I managed to sort the boiler out there and then.
So that's the gas engineer.
I know. I put that on
there. Save yourself £70.
all those years of building up that good relationship. He's probably seen it on Instagram stories now. So he's that bastard.
He's never using it again.
Fixed his own boilers now. Yeah. But no, that's obviously the general macro picture. So moving on to the kind of more property focused stuff now. So I always look at house prices, but generally in the past what I've done is I pulled out the land registry data, so the ROS figures. But what we're finding was they were really out of date, because you get the ones, so this is June, they would bring out the house prices for like April and June. But even those prices that are registered there, those are sales that had happened 3-4 months back.
Yeah, just coming through,
So what I've done now is I've changed it slightly. I'm now looking at Rightmove House Price Index and Zoopla House Price Index, because what they bring out is data based on asking prices, and it's more kind of real time. So it's in the last month, all the asking prices that have gone on. So I know it's not sales prices, but it gives you a more up-to-date picture. And just to pull out a few of the kind of the headline stats here, on a national level, what they're saying is that UK average prices an annual change of plus 0.8%, so very marginal, slight up. But at a Scottish level, we've actually got a increase of 1.7% across the country. And again, it's like, just to give a general trend of where things are headed. Obviously, each city has its own kind of micro, and within cities themselves as well have their own individual kind of micro markets. But this is just to give a general flavour of where things are going. And they actually came out with some stats to say that they reckon that there's the highest volume of sales since March 2022, sales agreed, so 6% higher than May 2024, which indicates that there's a lot more listings on the market, so up 11% year on year. So the supply's up 11%, the buyer demand is only up plus 3%. Now this is again national level, so again, demand's not really keeping up with supply, so I think that's cooled the market a little bit. I don't know if you have any thoughts. You used to be an estate agent as well, didn't you?
Yeah, that's right, yeah.
So that's the kind of general trend. I mean, if I speak to local agents, they're still saying, everything in decent areas is still going well over home report.
Always will do. Place hotspots like the West End of Glasgow, but you look at the other markets, so you're talking the micro markets like Inverness, for example. Yeah. You were talking about there the amount of properties that are actually on the market.
Yeah, that's rents, so we'll come on to the rents.
But no, I would say from the actual property itself, the property values, I mean, Scotland's always got the offers over, which kind of skews results slightly, I would say. If you look at the Rightmove, the statistics are probably generally over the whole of the UK and probably more predominantly England. Yeah. We've always got the kind of offers over the closing dates. You've got 5, 6, 7, 10 people going after the one property, which will push these levels up. But now is a very good time. I mean, if you're buying up market, I would say now is a very good time to buy if you're selling the flat and buying a house. Moving up market.
Stephen, any thoughts on the sales market at the moment? Have you been out doing any viewings, or have you had any feedback?
Yeah, I mean, I suppose that, like you say, the ones that are either in minted condition are going over the asking price, and the ones that are absolute shells are going quickly. But the stuff that sits in the middle is stuff that's starting to stick.
Right.
But the dated stock that's probably up at the valuation a little bit higher, where people have to still spend a bit of money on it. These properties are starting to stick a little bit now.
So obviously that's where, first time buyers, they've not got that 30, 40 grand just sitting about.
No.
Even in areas that I've been looking at recently, like St Andrews, where they would just typically fly, they're stalling. The tired stock's just sitting there and stalling a lot for a few weeks and even months now, and you're thinking, that's quite interesting that it's like stalling in St Andrews.
I've said this on the podcast before, but obviously like stamp duty is a huge issue for choking up the housing supply. So one of the big factors is that you've got a lot of these family homes, 4 or 5 bedroom properties that have like one, person living in them, and old, the baby boomers choking up the housing supply because families moved on. It's either the couple that are in the 5 bedroom detached bungalow or whatever, and it's just that is what's causing a real problem because it's too expensive for them to downsize because they need to pay.
The other thing is the inherited wealth. Where people have obviously made good, they've bought properties, done very well back in the 80s, whatever it was. And, the parents die off and then, you move back into the property and you're there, you'll sit, I
was speaking to friends of mine that are kind of near retirement, and they were actually saying something that I found quite interesting, is the 4 or 5 bed detached house that they're in, then when you actually look at the price of bungalows now, the downsize is not what downsize used to be. Let's go for a little bungalow, but the bungalows is as expensive as a 5 bed detached house because there's such a demand for them. They're saying, well, we couldn't downsize because it's not a financially viable option anymore.
Yep.
Because how much would you need to pay LBTT if you're sitting in a £500,000 house, you sell that, but then you want to downsize, even if it's something that's 250 grand or something like that.
You're not getting it for that price anymore.
Aye, but I'm talking about the stamp duty, obviously LBTT, you've got to pay. People are reluctant to move because they've got that cost.
Yeah.
So maybe they should come in because, that's not freeing up the stock for the next generation coming through.
Yep.
I think
house hoarding.
Aye. I think that's why they were talking about St Andrews there. I think that's why the supplies on areas like that are slowing right down because most people that are buying in St Andrews maybe are actually second homes.
But obviously that keeps, even though Rightmove are talking about demand's been down and it's only up 3% and the supply's up 11%, but that obviously that lack of supply of those types of properties coming on the market, that keeps the prices propped up as well. So I just don't see, people say, when's the next property crash? I just can't see it happening in Scotland in these kind of inner key sort of city areas anyway, because there is that kind of lack of supply.
I don't think there will be a crash in those areas, those generic hotspots.
Yeah.
You know, I think the other thing as well, just to digress slightly, is things like school fees. You know, the VAT and school fees, which obviously that's hit a lot of public schools where a lot of people are saying, well, that's an extra 20%. So you're paying your school fees, then
especially if you've got like 3 kids going to private school.
Then you've got to in reality say, can I afford to stay where I am, or do I take the kids to school? There's these things going on as well. And hotspots like St Andrews, the second home, is probably one of the first things to.
Yeah.
You don't do sales anymore, do you?
Brokering sales, landlord sales,
kind of just not internally sort of
thing. But I mean, you're talking about properties needing a bit more work now to actually get them over the finish line for the client. You got the client on the phone. Why is my house not selling? We've got everything from a sales point of view. Videos. You've got, schedule. We don't have to do schedules and print schedules off anymore, but everything is, the photographs are so much better now, so people are getting a fantastic site. But you've got negotiators who are experienced, I mean, a lot of people can just go in and become an estate agent overnight. That, if the market gets tough, you've got to work at it and get those sales through.
Yeah. Rents then, let's go on the rents in the rental market. This is from the Zoopla rental price index. So having a look at their report, and if I can just find it. Right, so Scotland's specific annual rent inflation up 2.4%, down from 9.1% last year. So you'll be seeing that firsthand, Colin. What's your, just to give us a general thought on what's happened there? Why are rents down? Or not going into negative.
The rents 2 years ago, I mean, there was a kind of hyperinflation, I would say, of rents where people were a bit worried about the rent cap and where we can actually pitch our stall out. And a lot of people were coming out and they were using the opportunity when they got a renewal to ramp the rents up. We saw rents, and that was basically down to the landlord rather than the actual agent. The agent would give the advice. A lot of the aspiration is that they've got properties that are worth more than they actually are. Have
you had any landlords come back to you asking you to put the rent up by crazy levels?
Yeah, absolutely.
What's your response to that?
Well, we had one specific just said, I want it as much as possible. There's one probably went to the rent assessment panel, and the rent assessment panel was obviously, the assessor was in Dundee. So they came down here, didn't know the Glasgow market. We sold I think we rented one out at 1,800 upstairs, and this one here was 1,500. So that became the rent 15, but it was still, did it a year later and it could be up to 1,800. So the landlord just said, I just want it up to the maximum. He doesn't live here, lives right. in overseas. And I don't think he just gets, I think he just wants as much as he can possibly get. Yeah. There is always that.
There's few though, isn't it? Most landlords are reasonable, and most of them will take the feedback from us as agents and say, look, okay, you'd now have the right to increase to market level.
What you want.
What is the reality of saying to somebody, where are you finding an extra £300 a month,
Yeah. Exactly.
I think most people are living paycheck to paycheck, month to month. Most people's bank account balances go to zero most months.
There's no disposable income.
Where's that extra £300 a month coming from? So do you want to have the hassle of having to find a new tenant, the costs of having to find a new tenant, the maintenance and repairs, all the rest of it? So you need to kind of weigh it up. Yeah. And maybe you could get it up by £100 would be a lot. Depends
on the percentage,
and it depends on what they do as well. Have they had a wage increase over the last?
I mean, it basically means as well for a tenant there that the aspiration may well be to buy property, and the rental is just a temporary stopgap until they can get to that end result. And there's no disposable income to put aside in a pot for the deposit, which, as we know, is probably just goes in the offers over price.
Just looking at the cities, because Zoopla have a list of By the way, if anyone's interested in this, you can go online and download the report, but it gives you the top 15, gives you 15 cities listed about how the rents have done. Just looking at it, Glasgow and Edinburgh, 8 and 9, up about 2.5%. Interesting though, it names Dundee. Dundee are one of the few areas in the UK where rents fell by -2%. So we'll need to ask our Dundee contacts what is going on there, but we need to ask Neil Dimmick what's going on there. But I think it's something to do with that adjustment back to normal levels of like foreign students and all that, possibly, because Dundee's very reliant on the student population market.
Very, very. And obviously the big thing recently was the Dundee University laying people off, and
they were in a bit of trouble.
They were in debt, so there's 200 employees or whatever. The Glasgow market, I would say the Glasgow market specifically, if you look at the overseas students coming in, it's a massive cash cow, massive. I think we actually worked out about £80,000 per student coming from China for the economy. That's tuition fees, rent, buying their tech. They like to buy their Apple stuff, the utilities, food, designer clothes, all the rest of it. But £80,000 per year per person, you multiply that by potentially 6,000 for Glasgow University students. And it gives you
which is why you're seeing a huge increase in the amount of purpose-built student accommodation going up everywhere as well.
Yep.
I think in Glasgow alone, there was currently 17 planning applications for purpose-built student accommodation blocks.
Yep.
These aren't just small units, these are
170 units.
So that'll be interesting to see how that plays out.
And see how it affects the HMO investors in Glasgow as well.
Well, the HMO and the EPCs, I think that will affect, because big old flats in the West End, 7 bedrooms or whatever, and you've got an EPC rating, which is probably maybe not as good as it could be, but again, the landlord to get it up to that.
Then you've got a purpose-built new block.
It's a purpose-built new block. But yeah, a lot of students we speak to, they don't rely on moving into student accommodation. They don't want to be in a student accommodation. They'd rather be in a flat, like sharing two, rather than a student block. There's apocryphal stories about a couple of units down in Glasgow, Meadowside Walk, down that way, down the bottom of Bars Road, partially funded by the Chinese government. Obviously I don't know the ins and outs.
Is that the one near the Liddles?
Not that one. It's the first one you come to. Right. If you come in Byers Road, the first one.
Aye.
And they even included things like rice cookers and all the rest of it to try and attract the Chinese to go in. So, but there's Chinese students probably in most of them. The one by the Lidl as well as
you can't go wrong with that microwavable rice now. The one you get in the bag. Do you know what I mean? That's
but
2 minutes.
That's not the Chinese. The way the Chinese have their rice is quite it's sacrosanct.
Kidding on. Motherwell is a hot spot. We're not far from Motherwell here actually.
No.
We're in Wishaw, but Motherwell rents up 8.3%. So if anybody's looking for a good area to invest, obviously go in and do your own due diligence on certain areas, because there are certain areas in Motherwell like Forgewood and all the rest of it where, like going back 10 years, a total war zone down there. So you need to be careful. I think it's a bit better now. But rent's good there. So good potential, good yields for people, any investors looking at that.
I'm going to pick up an Aberdeen market there,
mate. I'm giving Aberdeen a rest this month because it's not really popped up. It's lying around about middle of the table. So it's climbed up a little bit. Aberdeen 11th in the table out of 15th. Well, I say middle. That is bottom end still. Rent's up 2%. So we do have an increase on rents up there. How are you finding it yourself up there, Stephen?
Yeah, good. Property demand's good.
That's why I'm giving you a rest. You managed to fill up your HMOs, all right?
Yeah, only had a couple of week void in 2 or 3 of them. Enough time to get them, little lick of paint and get some maintenance updates. So yeah,
it's all students, right?
All students,
and it's friends that are coming together probably after the first year of university.
Oh, sharing a flat,
sharing the flat, yeah.
So that's been good to keep the voids low.
Nice.
Are you still getting student accommodation units up in Aberdeen? Is that as popular?
There was a hotel that lay empty, a Hilton hotel that someone bought and converted to I think it was 103 units, which I thought was maybe going to take the hit, but they're. I think you're maybe right as well. Like with the right location, students are like, to hell with the custom block that's a bit far away, or they'll want the better location where they can share with their friends. And
we were talking earlier on about obviously Glasgow's just going nuts at the moment with student accommodation, and there was one property, Dalian House, which had been empty since we set up in 2008.
That was old health board.
The old health board, Glasgow City Council, and it's not a bad building. Had about 200 car park spaces, which I think I don't know who was running the car park space, but they were I think renting spaces out £5 a day or whatever it was. So somebody was making something, and it was recently converted into student accommodation. So it's repurposing the building that's there rather than building a new, 7-8 story building. I mean, right behind our offices, behind the Scottish Power building in Charing Cross, there's going to be the tallest building in Scotland being built. That's student accommodation.
Yeah.
Well,
which is horrendous.
The thing is as well, the government need to look at that, because obviously you hear about initial investors into that. We're actually looking at the build to rent market, which is obviously going to help solve the housing crisis. But now these investors, and we're talking about pension fund money, they're like that, and they'll sack this because of the rent controls and the uncertainty with the Scottish government. They're like that. The student rental, the purpose-built student accommodation, the legislation and policy doesn't apply to student lets.
No. That's nuts though. It's going to be the biggest building in Scotland, the tallest building in Scotland. It's going to be student accommodation.
Aye, it's tallest.
That's crazy.
Which is where the old Portcullis House used to be.
Right.
Charing Cross. Behind, the Scottish Power building. Behind that.
So they're talking about exemptions now in the latest housing bill that's going through Parliament. And one of the exemptions is going to be, exemptions to the rent controls is going to be to the build to rent developers,
right?
To try and attract them back in, because they lost so much interest there.
Well, they all headed south.
Yeah. Manchester, Newcastle, etc. So a lot of pressure on the government at the moment. This housing bill going through to try and get it right, to try and obviously fix what's all going wrong in the housing. So moving on to a bit of news then. We've got a new housing minister just been put in. So this is the Mary Macmillan, newly appointed SNP Housing Secretary. Replaces... Can't remember his name. Can you remember?
McLennan.
We'll just call him McLennan. The guy that knocked us back for the podcast anyway, because we actually got a response from one of his civil servants. So we got the official headed government letter back to say sorry.
Donald McLennan, wasn't it?
No. Was it no? Anyway, can't remember.
No, it's definitely not going to come on now.
No, because we forgot his name.
Yeah. But you've asked the new one.
So Mary Macmillan, she seems like from the pictures and all that, from what I've seen, she seems like
quite young.
Very young, progressive, aye. So hopefully she'll think to herself, well, podcast, younger audience and all the rest of it. She'll see the opportunity there to come on the podcast. So we've got to reach out. But anyway, I'm going to slag her off now because she's already failed miserably. So in one of her first interviews on STV, she couldn't actually name the number of people on Scotland's social housing waiting list, which was a bit of a gaffe, because the interviewer, if you watch it back, said, right, how are you going to solve this crisis? How many people have you got the numbers? How many people are currently?
So that's almost as bad as saying what crisis.
Exactly. So she was told live on air. She had to be told by the journalist who was interviewing her and it was terrible looking. She just kind of froze, and she was like, "Oh, I don't have those figures on hand at the moment. They're on my dashboard in Parliament, and I didn't bring them with." Surely, if you're going to be appointed to solve the housing crisis,
you know what the ceiling.
You're going to know how many people are currently on the housing waiting list. So it's 200. Anyway, for all our listeners now, I'm going to educate you as well. It's 250,000 people that are currently on the waiting list, and this she's got to. If she listened to the podcast, she would have known, because we talk about this regularly. So this is how it doesn't breathe a lot of confidence, when you've got these people put in power and they don't know the basics. So how are we going to fix the basics?
Maybe she just stumbled. Let's give her the benefit of the doubt. Okay. Maybe she was nervous and she's new in the job.
Yeah. Somebody hadn't given the stats.
The right prep.
Well, give her the opportunity to put it right and come on the podcast
we'll do it.
and explain. So Mary Macmillan, if you listen to this, which I'm sure she doesn't. If one of your employees at the Scottish Government listen, and you can get us an interview with Mary McCallan and try and set it up for us, because we failed with Patrick Harvey, we failed with McLennan. We'll just call him McLennan. Still not come back to me. Was it not Keith? I'm going to need to look that up now, guys. Talk amongst yourselves.
Oh, God.
So, yes, no, it's a... Sure, it was done.
Paul McLennan.
Paul McLennan.
Yeah. So we never get any of them on. So hopefully we'll get Mary on. Right, nice one. Moving on.
Donald McLennan, not the Professor of Housing at Glasgow University.
You're getting confused with that.
Yep, I think. Very engaging chap.
Sorry. Okay, so fancy making £1,000 for sending a WhatsApp. Let's take a wee break to talk about referring sellers to John and Lewis at Prime Property Auctions. Me and Stephen have both done it, and it couldn't be easier. If you know someone selling a property, the guys will pay you £1,000 or 1% of the sale price, whatever's higher, just for passing their details. Doesn't matter if the seller is already with an estate agent or not, just drop the guys a message and they'll do everything from the first call to getting the property sold. Know someone who might be looking to sell or struggling to get a result with their agent? Go to the link in the show notes and send them a message now. We'll need to cut this silence because I've lost my place now, Googling that guy.
We cut nothing.
What's the time? 29 minutes in. Let's...
There's no edits. It's one take.
So how are you finding things in the estate agency world as well? Or?
No, just landlord.
Yeah.
Aye.
So the coalface, how are you finding things? How are you finding or seeing the market?
I think the level of supply and demand's probably pretty decent. It's okay. Mm-hmm. It's not crazy like it was before. Mm-hmm. But I think it's the affordability that's going to concern me as I keep getting squeezed. Yeah. And some form of recession comes in. And, is affordability going to just change with people can't afford these properties as well? Yeah. It drops back down. I don't know. Mm-hmm. I suppose the student market's good because more well-off families, their parents are propping up the rent and guaranteeing the rent, so they're pretty good and solid. But it's the
right. Okay, I'm back on track. So Scottish Government backed affordable homes start slump to the lowest level in 12 years. So a great way for Mary to start the housing crisis. Like the stats have just come out to say they're at the lowest level.
Only way is up then.
Well, that's it. Surely it can't get any worse. So just to give you some stats, new figures show just 4,755 affordable homes started in 2024-25, the lowest in 12 years, down 30% from the year before.
That's a huge decrease.
That's crazy. 8,000 fewer starts than pre-pandemic levels. Completions also fell 7,400. The current government target is 110,000 affordable homes by 2032. So this was the Nicola Sturgeon stat. She came out in 2022, it was, with this 10-year vision.
Plan. Yes.
And again, this is why I go back to politicians just talking shit and just not backing it up with action.
But no one's going to go back to her because she's out of the job. Their term's only 4 years, so no one's holding them to any bit kind of accountability. They can say what they want, do what they want.
It's like 2 steps forward, 1 step back, or 1 step forward, 2 steps back. Case of the SNP, I think.
And you can do the sums from that. Like, so as of March 2025, only 28,537 have actually been completed out of that 110,000 target, right? So now we've only got 7 years left till that goal, and we've only built 28,000. So, do the sums. There's a heck of a lot of catching up to do. We've got 15,000 children in homeless or temporary accommodation. Not acceptable. This housing emergency just seems to be getting worse. It's crazy. I mean, we obviously know the answer is to build more homes, but someone seriously needs to come up with a strategic plan to get the investment in, because obviously the government has no money because it's skint. Councils have got no money.
ADR abatement. Do you know?
What's that?
ADR, just to... Additional dwelling supplement, ADS.
No, ADS. Yeah.
What, put that up more? We're already at 8%.
A moratorium to get rid of it.
I was
Get more people in. Get more people building houses.
Right, aye.
Bring back some investment from down south that all buggered off down.
Well, I think that could obviously help the private rented stock.
I always do a flips on the property business. Like there's always a few on the go at any given time, but that just makes it harder.
Yeah.
And you know, between the 8% ADS getting factored into the cost of buying a second home and the council tax being, they're really stringent now on, because of that skin, but they're on their case now for 200% council tax. So if someone's already utilised their empty homes relief, as soon as you buy it, you're trying to put it back into circulation. So I understand why ADS is there to this level of playing field for first-time buyers, and understand why the 200% council tax is there, but we're just getting penalised for it. And you have to factor those costs in. You can't afford to pay what the seller wants or the market demands there. So you're going, well, that's not incentivising the developer to bring properties back to market.
No. Well, let's give Sal's John Blackwood a wee shout out, because he went in front of the government to say that he suggested, on behalf of landlords and investors, that there should be a moratorium on, is that the right word?
Yep.
Aye, a freeze on the ADS basically to encourage investors back in, which I think is a very sensible idea. But whether the government can actually afford to go down that route in terms of the revenue that generates, because they're obviously seeing that as an easy way, because the amount that it's gone from 3% to 4% to 6% to 8% over the last few years, they're obviously seeing us as an easy target.
Cash cow, exactly.
Do you know what I mean? So can they basically now justify that? It'd be interesting to see. Obviously, Labour came out with their spending plans and increased the amount of spending for housing. So I don't know how that will obviously filter through to the grant that obviously Scotland receive, Barnett Formula, whatever it's called.
One of the other directors from SAL was speaking at the Dundee Scottish Property Podcast event last month, and she was really, really good. And she was saying that I think it was the same day that the housing bill was passed. Is it the second part?
Second tier. Second stage.
And she was saying that there's a couple of sections on it that we need to make landlords and investors aware. I think it was section 16. There's a section on it saying that if you want to be able to bring your property to market rent, tick that box. If not, they'll just slide under that you can't.
Yeah.
So there's a couple of things we need to pay attention for in that bill.
Short-term lets in Highlands, big talking point. So Highland Council is proposing a Highland regional Highland wide control zone for short-term lets like Airbnb, requiring both a licence and planning permission. It follows growing concerns about the impact of short-term rents on housing availability. To give you the stats, 7,011 short-term let licences were granted in the Highlands and only 4 were refused. Council's currently processing around 8,000 applications just within the region. This is close to my heart. Come from Inverness, grew up, born in Inverness.
That's almost Edinburgh numbers, isn't it?
Well, it's about on par with Edinburgh and in the Inverness Crown area alone, not far from where I went to school at Milburn Academy. Survey found that there's over 50 short-term rents just in the one neighbourhood.
Wow.
So you can understand how
they're squeezing that market up there for people trying to actually rent properties.
Yeah, and obviously, like, it's a huge part of their economy.
Tourism.
North Coast 500 has got a lot to answer for.
Yep.
Do you know what I mean?
The person that come up with that should be knighted if they aren't already. Like, that was a genius from the Scottish Tourist Board to come up with that. You know, the route that we've probably all been on for years and years and years. They put a name to it. So it's a marketing campaign, but and boom, it's exploded those areas.
Yeah.
I mean, it has done. I know a couple of people that live on the north, and they're basically saying that it's not as, if they're taking the camper van or whatever it is, which they're not really suitable for the roads anyway, but they're stocking up food in, for example, Fort William, driving up. So they're not, and they're eating in the vans, they're parking in a labour, whatever. They're not actually spending money. And the whole thing is actually spending money. It's the tourism that these guys are obviously.
They all like shut on a Sunday though, the cafes and pubs and everything up there, don't they? Is that a religious thing? But
I don't think so. I wouldn't.
No, it's not that bad anymore. That was more like kind of Sky and all that, wasn't it? Back in, going back 20 years and stuff with the wee freeze and stuff.
I went up on Sunday.
Was that still happening?
Aye.
Where you were?
I went to Gairloch. I got as far as Gairloch on Sunday. slept there for the night. But I mean, I found a local pub, but going up, it was like struggling to find a coffee, struggling to find a.
Well, they don't have the staff. Part of the problem is they don't have
the staff.
They don't have the staff because they don't have the accommodation to put them in.
And Brexit as well. That was the other.
Yeah, Eastern Europeans going back.
Used to go in and.
But the ASSC, Fiona Campbell, what they called again, the Association of
Self-Catering
Caterers, they say it's regulatory overkill because STRs, short-term rents, generate 200 million annually for the Highland economy, supporting 7,000 jobs. So that's the kind of other side of it. But Inverness, a population of 65,000, I actually thought, I wonder how many long-term rentals are actually on the market. So I jumped on Rightmove last night. There was only 11 listings. And that's not just for the city. That's for as far out as, like, you go out kind of, I think I went as far out as kind of doors, right out to Loch Ness and all the rest of it, not just in the city itself. 11 listings, so you can understand how obviously local government, the council, and young people who are growing up and they're just trying to get a rental property, how difficult that is. Obviously that's putting the pressure on the council to do something about it.
I couldn't believe the sales prices, because everywhere I went, I stopped for a coffee and just like backtracking I passed that little village, that was a nice wee spot, let me have a look at the prices there, and then I couldn't believe the prices of the properties as well, and they were still selling. I used to always think that years ago, what these people do to afford those prices, because they weren't cheap properties. You think, in the middle of nowhere, no one's going to have really good jobs or high-paying jobs. The property prices were expensive.
And again, you can put your property on for whatever market. If there's a buyer for it, that creates the market.
Well, let's put it in front of you guys, right? If you've got a wee, I don't know, 3-bedroom house up there or something like that, right? Are you going to put it on the rental market to get £900 a month, or are you going to get £150 a night?
£200 a night on Airbnb.
£200 a night. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So there must be, obviously there's thousands of them. There's 7,000 that potentially were in the longer term rental market.
I think that's where my thought was going the other day, was that the prices were expensive because there's a demand for investment there. It was in Loch Morrie, near Mallaig. I looked at a house there and I thought, that's beautiful. Maybe look at that for a price. And it was over 450 grand. It was already under offer. I'm thinking, but somebody can get £300, £400 a night for that. It's a good investment. Yep. So maybe that is what's driving the property prices and demand up there even more, that you're not going to get them on the local normal long-term rent because people are going to just milk that.
What you're tending to get in Skye, around about Slate, a lot of what we call white settlers, people coming up, retiring in England, buying a property. They can afford to sell their property in London.
Cash
buyer, outbid the local market. Yep. So the local, wee Jeannie down the road, there's no way she's going to be able to afford
ban the English, that's what I say. And then, oops, that's just lost 60% of our listeners.
And then when you come to sell, obviously when they're selling, they want to hit obviously Rightmove's there, but they may want to go to CKD or Savills or whatever it is to try and get that premium price from a foreign buyer, maybe.
Yeah.
Well, that obviously boomed during kind of lockdown and all that. A lot of English buyers coming up as well, didn't it?
It's
remote working from home.
It's been from about 20 odd years, maybe even more than that. People retire, they just retire. They love Skye. They've been up the Skye in the holidays and they just like it. And they were actually saying recently, said, don't bother. If you've not got accommodation, don't go on to Skye because there's no room at the inn.
Yeah.
Which is...
I got some analysis on Monday evening by pure luck. But yeah, it's interesting to say that. I don't think I heard a single Scottish person the whole few days was away up north.
Yeah, guys, I'm only joking about the English. Like,
you better backtrack on that.
Got lots of good English friends, not just a joke. So, last article, buy to let in 2025. Let's finish off with your thoughts. Is the dream still alive? So, as the public appetite is still strong, according to one news article we've got here. 1 in 3 British people say they still want to own a buy-to-let. Among 18 to 34-year-olds, over 50% expressed interest compared to just 14% of over 55s. So despite tax and regulation changes, the UK love affair with bricks and mortar remains. So when they're interviewing the older folk, they're not so keen, but apparently younger folks still have that aspiration. So that's not really what you were seeing, Colin. You were thinking...
We're seeing a lot of... there's a lot of older generation, older renters, who have been...
Older landlords or...
Older landlords, sorry. Landlords have basically been, they've been the journey, and now they're looking for an exit, They're seeing all the compliance issues, all the money that's costing them to get their property up to, repairing standards and so on. What we're also seeing, the flip side of that, is younger generation coming in who expect that because they've been brought up in an ever-compliant world, and they know they have to make sure all the certs and everything are all there. And overseas investors who are not reluctant investors, but investors who've maybe been out there and they realise that it's still a good, on the long term, to buy a property for a pension if they're maybe expat living abroad, invest their money. The hot spots, so obviously, as we know, Glasgow, Edinburgh, Aberdeen, Dundee, you mentioned, is maybe slightly dropping slightly. But you've got Glasgow, more seats of learning. You're always going to find accommodation or a requirement for accommodation. Edinburgh as well. Foreign students coming in. Yeah, I would definitely say it's still we're seeing a lot of people still buying and interested in investing in the city.
Do you know there were 61,570 new buy-to-let companies set up in 2024? That was alone.
Wow.
So I think that
In where?
That's in the UK.
UK wide, right?
Yeah, because obviously Companies House is UK in it.
It would be, yeah.
It's government. That's UK government figures. Mm-hmm. So that's a lot of buy-to-let companies. Mm-hmm. Mind you, we talked to a company way back 3-4 years ago, and the way they were setting up the buy-to-let company registration was they were setting up
one
per
property.
Property.
Yeah.
So I didn't get that, actually. We never really got to the bottom of that.
Do you know what? It's probably quite an interesting one if you're looking to exit, because if someone's wanting to buy your property, they can just buy the company, not the company. Yes.
Yeah.
And then you're buying a...
I think they were doing that so that they could justify one set of accounts for each so they
company.
could get, like, if you had a 10 property portfolio, they could charge a fee, 10 times the fee.
So the account would make more money than the actual landlord.
I don't know, we'll need to see.
Usually to be viable, there'd be 4 or 5 properties make it viable for a limited company. Not one. But
the average landlord profit on a sale of a property in 2024 was 103,640, a 70% gain over 11 to 12 years. So again, reinforces the point, buy-to-let property, long-term play. I don't think you can go too far wrong if you are running it as a business and you've got a decent-sized portfolio over time. I think the days of buying 1 or 2 properties for a pension play are kind of long gone, which we can say.
It's basically a win-win situation. I mean, you're getting, if you're a tenant, it's really a loss because you're paying the rent, and especially the peak rents that we're seeing now, where there's nothing to show at the end of the day. You leave that property after 5 years, they've not got anything to show. But the landlord had his mortgage paid by the rent, his property's increased in value, so it's a win-win for the landlord. So it's still a, from a landlord perspective, it's still, and the tenants have that flexibility though, that they can, if they don't like where they're at, they can move or transient. Yeah.
Like, I've got to say, like, when I go into these SAL meetings online and that, because the profile is a lot more kind of older demographic to the likes of our podcast community, right? Mm-hmm. So it's kind of a different view altogether. So you've got the SAL meetings, they're quite doom and gloom, like, oh, this is just not working anymore, like blah blah blah. Right, but then we've got our podcast community. We get guests on, like our next guest here, Chris. I think he's bought like 50 properties already this year.
Aye, we're just flying.
So you kind of like see it from both sides.
Yeah. There's people coming in with a fresh outlook, like you're saying, that they understand compliance. They're not buying them in their personal name, they're buying them in a limited company, they're scaling, they're treating it like a business. Whereas the original generation of landlords was just like, oh, this is a buy-to-let thing the last 30 years, and we'll buy it for our pension, and we've got to then go and take care of the property. We've got a gas safety, now we've got to get this, and it just, as it's been getting increased, they're just getting more and more fed up with this. Is not what I came into. I'm changing my mind.
Which creates the opportunity for the new ones coming through. Absolutely. So we need to encourage that and obviously get a new generation of landlords and investors through to keep the private rented sector thriving. Yep. Colin, you've been brilliant. Thanks very much for your time and your thoughts and your opinions. And where can people reach out to you? Obviously, you do lettings in Glasgow. So if you're a landlord looking to rent your property,
GlasgowPropertyLetting.com, website's there, or call me.
Nice one.
Numbers on the website.
Thanks for taking the time. Take care.
Thank you. Cheers guys.